The morning after my husband's funeral, I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by condolence flowers that already smelled of rot. My hands were still trembling when the agency envelope arrived, cream paper, neat handwriting, and the faint scent of disinfectant. Inside was a single page. Name: Cecilia Harrow, 58 years old. Experience: caretaking, nursing, housekeeping. The name stopped me cold. Harrow. That name had been erased from our family record 32 years ago, the night my sister Cecilia burned to death in our childhood home. For a long minute, I just stared at the paper. The kitchen clock ticked louder than it should. Outside, the wind scraped against the windows like fingernails. Knife! My throat tightened. I tried to laugh. A dry, shaky sound. But the air in my chest felt like smoke. Then came the knock on the door. 3 soft taps. Familiar. I opened it. A woman stood there, wrapped in a beige coat, holding a cup of tea as if she already belonged in my house. Her hair was silver gray, her posture straight but careful, like someone learning to move again. "Good morning, Mrs. Miriam," she said. "I came earlier than expected. Only sawed. I hope that's all right." Her voice, low, a little rough, slid into the room before I could stop it. It hit me like a memory too vivid to be real. The eyes. The faint scar by her mouth. The way she said my name. Softly, as if testing it for cracks. The cup in my hand slipped. Porcelain shattered across the floor. Tea bleeding into the rug. I heard myself whisper, "Cecilia, you're alive?" The woman tilted her head slightly. That half-smile my sister used to wear when she caught me lying. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she said gently. "I must be mistaken." And just like that, with one calm sentence, she buried my sanity all over again. I stood there, frozen between the smell of lilies and dust, between the house I owned and the grave I thought she lay in. My pulse hammered against my throat, my hands wanted to reach out and shake her, to pull the truth out of her skin. But I couldn't move. The silence stretched, heavy and dry. I heard the refrigerator hum, the clock ticking, the whisper of her shoes on the wooden floor as she stepped inside. She walked past me, as if she'd never left, as if she had always lived here. When she reached the hallway mirror, she paused. Our reflections lined up for a second. Same height, same eyes, same blood. Only one of us was supposed to be alive. She turned, smiling politely. "Would you like me to start in the kitchen, Mrs. Gare?" "Miriam?" Something inside me cracked open, a soundless, invisible break. For a second, I saw it. The burning house, the orange glow on her face, the scream swallowed by flame. And then, nothing. I forced myself to breathe, to speak, to make sense of what was happening. "You can start wherever you like," I managed. My voice didn't sound like mine. As she walked away, I caught the faint scent of smoke clinging to her clothes. It was the same smell that had haunted my dreams for 32 years. I pressed my hand against the table to steady myself. The wood felt warm, as if someone had just laid an iron on it. That's when I realized my body was shaking. Not from grief, but recognition. Every cell remembered her. Every part of me screamed sister, even when my mind said impossible. She moved through the house with the ease of someone returning, not arriving. Each step, each glance, each small touch, as if she were checking to see if I'd kept everything exactly where she left it. Maybe I had. By the time I found my voice again, she had disappeared into the kitchen. The kettle began to hiss, the same way it did the night of the fire. I stood there, trapped between disbelief and guilt, until she called out, calm, ordinary, human. "Would you like sugar with your tea, Mrs. Miriam?" That's when the chill truly sank in, because that was the exact sentence my sister said. Seconds before the fire started, the past had walked back into my house, made itself tea, and called me by name. My name is Miriam Harrow, 56 years old, owner of a small antique restoration studio on the outskirts of Boston. People call me the woman who resurrects broken things. I spend my days sanding, mending, polishing, painting, returning life to what the world has already thrown away. The irony has never been lost on me. I can restore everything except the one thing I lost. The house I live in now used to be a dream drawn on a matchbox, a sketch Cecilia and I made when we were still girls. She wanted a wide porch for reading. I wanted an attic for painting. We called it the Revival House. A home built not for wealth, but for survival. When I finally bought it decades later, I told myself it was a tribute to her. But the truth is, I bought it to keep her ghost contained. Every morning, I open the curtains and watch the sunlight crawl across the wooden floor. The beams fall exactly the way the fire once did. Thin, golden tongues licking at the walls. There are days when I still smell smoke, even though the house I live in was never burned. 32 years ago, I was 24, newly engaged, and still foolish enough to believe family could survive anything. Cecilia and I shared that old two-story home on Hawthorne Street, the one that smelled of linseed oil and wet paint. We were restoring antique frames together back then. She handled the carving, I handled the gold leaf. That night, the storm outside sounded like it was trying to claw its way in. We argued about money, about my fiancé, about the future that didn't seem to have room for both of us. I remember shouting, "You can't keep saving everything that's already dead." She threw a rag at me, laughed without humor, and said, "Then maybe I'll let something die for once." I went upstairs, angry, certain she'd follow to apologize like always. Instead, I woke to the smell of gasoline. By the time I stumbled down the stairs, the entire living room was glowing orange. She was at the doorway, coughing, holding the family photograph of our mother, the one framed in cherry wood. I screamed for her to leave it. She shook her head. "Go, Miriam. Run." The ceiling cracked. The photograph slipped from her arms as I lunged toward her. For 1 second our hands touched, warm, then burning. Then, the smoke swallowed her. I remember the taste of ash in my mouth when the firemen dragged me out. They said no one else survived. The body they found was charred beyond recognition, but the ring on its hand matched hers. That was enough for everyone. Everyone except me. Grief turns practical when you have bills to pay. Within months, I sold our old shop downtown and opened a smaller studio, Harrow and Daughters Antique Restoration. Though there were no daughters, only me. I told clients the name honored my late sister. They found it touching. Every piece I restored, I signed discreetly with her initials, CH. It was my penance. I used part of the insurance money to fund a scholarship for women in craft restoration. People praised my generosity. They didn't know it was guilt money, blood tithed to the fire. In my workshop there is one corner I never let anyone clean. On a wooden pedestal sits the frame of fire, the same charred frame that once held our mother's photograph. The glass is gone, the edges blackened, but the inner groove still smells faintly of smoke when it rains. Clients think it's an art piece. It isn't. It's a warning. Sometimes, when the city grows too quiet, I hear the crackle again. It's not loud, just a faint hiss, as if the frame remembers the sound of its own burning. Cecilia was the brave one, older by 2 years, reckless, radiant. She loved danger, the way some people love prayer, believing it could purify her. She once climbed the roof during a storm just to see lightning closer. She came down soaked, laughing, and told me, "Fear keeps you clean." She was also the only person who understood how our parents' silence shaped us, how their absence became the third sister in the room. After they died, she kept us afloat with her craft. I was the dreamer. She was the spine. When she died, I learned how useless a dreamer is without someone holding her upright. There's a line she used to say when we finished restoring a burned frame: "If one day you forget me, let the ashes remind you." I did forget her. At least, I tried. But ashes don't forget. They cling to everything. They live in the seams of the floorboards, in the lungs, in the skin. Over the years, I became known for my ability to restore even smoke-damaged antiques. Chiquaya, museums consulted me. Doctors trusted me. They said my hands were steady. If only they knew how hard they shook when no one was looking. I never remarried after my husband died. He was a kind man, gentle, uncurious. He never asked about the scar on my wrist or why I refused to light candles in the house. He left me the studio, the house, and silence, So much silence that it sometimes hummed. To do with work. Every mirror, every cracked porcelain, every faded photograph became a piece of penance. The studio smelled of varnish and lavender, the same mix Cecilia used when we worked together. Some evenings, when the light hit just right, I could swear I saw her reflection move behind mine in the glass. When the agency called last week about a new housekeeper, I almost said no. But grief does strange things to logic. After months of handling condolences, paperwork, and empty rooms, I simply wanted another heartbeat in the house. I never imagined that heartbeat would echo one I buried. Looking back now, maybe there were signs even before she arrived. The night before I received her file, I dreamed of fire again, but this time, it didn't hurt. It just burned clean, like sunlight through water. I woke up with the taste of smoke and salt on my tongue. I told myself it was just memory. But memory, like ash, doesn't stay buried. People think restoration is about beauty. It isn't. It's about control, deciding which cracks to erase and which to keep visible. I've built a life on choosing which damage deserves to remain. Maybe that's why I kept the frame of fire all these years. Not as a relic, but as proof that something destroyed can still tell the truth. Because deep down, I always feared that if I threw it away, the truth would find another way to return. And now, standing in my quiet house with the smell of lilies fading, the door newly opened to a woman who wears my sister's face. I realize it already has. I can still smell those nights. The thick blend of varnish, coffee, and metal rain. Back then our world was small. A basement studio lit by a single bulb swinging from a frayed cord, 2 chipped mugs, and the soft jazz station Cecilia loved. We worked until dawn, side by side, restoring forgotten frames that no one else would touch. Cecilia always took the burned ones. She said they had a story that survived the heat. She'd lean close to the wood, running her fingers over the blackened edges as though tracing veins. "Everything can burn," she would whisper, "except blood." I used to laugh, thinking she meant family loyalty. Now I know she meant the curse of it. The way blood remembers even what the mind tries to bury. We were poor then, and happy in the way people are when they still believe in someday. Our tools were secondhand, our brushes frayed, our hands stained gold from leafing powder. She called the dust on our skin the glow of survival. Cecilia was 26, I was 24. She'd already been through heartbreak, loss, all the little debts that make a woman older than her years. But when she laughed, she looked 16 again, head thrown back, eyes wide, the sound bright enough to scare away the dark. Sometimes she'd dance around the workshop, twirling a brush like a baton, paint speckling the floor. I'd scold her, pretending to be serious. "Stop it, you'll ruin the finish." "Then we'll refinish it," she'd say, spinning faster. "That's what we do, remember? We fix the burn." One night we were finishing a commission, a Victorian frame half melted from a house fire. The air smelled of smoke and turpentine. She stood beside me, hair tied in a red scarf, sleeves rolled up, humming off key. When I tried to straighten the warped side, the wood splintered. It cursed under my breath. Cecilia laughed and covered my hand with hers, guiding the brush gently. Her touch was warm, steady, patient. "You press too hard when you care too much," she murmured. "Then how do you keep things from breaking?" "You don't," she said. "You let them break, and then you love what's left." I remember that line more vividly than the fire itself. Years later, while sorting through the remnants of the blaze, I found a half-burned envelope inside the debris of our old workshop. The two of us in that basement, grinning through a cloud of dust. The right corner was gone, burned into a jagged crescent. But our eyes survived. Our eyes, unmistakable, alive. I framed that photograph in the same charred border we'd been repairing that night. It became the first relic I ever restored on my own. The blackened wood still smelled faintly of her perfumed cheap vanilla mixed with smoke. Every time I looked at it, I could hear her voice again. "Everything can burn, except blood." I didn't understand then that she meant it literally, that even a body can vanish. But the bond chemical, ancestral, spiritual, will always find its way back, even if it has to crawl through ash. Sometimes, when I close the studio late at night, I still hear our old radio humming a few static notes of jazz before going silent. I'll glance toward the frame of fire in the corner, and for an instant I see the reflection of two women instead of one holding a brush, the other holding a flame. That memory doesn't hurt anymore. It just breathes, faint and warm, like an ember that refuses to die out. Since the day Cecilia moved in, the house began to change. Not in ways a stranger would notice, but in the kind only the owner of a haunted memory could feel. At first, it was small things. The frame of fire, which I had left untouched for years, suddenly gleamed as if someone had polished it. The thin layer of ash that always clung to its edges was gone. No one but me was allowed in that corner. When I asked, she smiled politely. "I just wiped the dust, Mrs. Miriam." It looked neglected. Neglected. That word felt like a slap. I had spent half my life protecting that ash, treating it like a shrine to grief. Neglect had nothing to do with it. It was preservation. After that, I began to notice other details. The old mirror in my bedroom, the one I'd inherited from our mother, started to catch light differently. In daylight, it looked normal, but at night, it reflected too much. If I stood in front of it, the room behind me shimmered faintly, as though someone else was breathing there. One night, I saw two shadows instead of one, all standing still, both facing me. I turned around. The room was empty. I told myself it was fatigue. Weeks of mourning, long nights restoring clients' antiques, the dull ache of widowhood. Grief can bend the senses. But then the noises began. At 3 a.m., I'd hear soft humming coming from the kitchen. The same melody Cecilia used to hum when sanding frames. Slow, circular, unending. I would walk downstairs, barefoot, the floorboards creaking under me, and find her silhouette by the sink. Sometimes she would be washing dishes that were already clean. Sometimes she would just stand there, holding a cup, whispering to herself. One night, I paused in the hallway and listened. Her voice was low, cracked, but familiar. "This time, I won't run, Miriam." The words hit me like a current. It wasn't the voice of an employee. It was the voice from 32 years ago, the one that screamed for me to run while the flames rose behind her. My throat went dry. I stepped into the kitchen. "Do you say something?" I asked. She looked up calmly, wiping her hands on a towel. "Just talking on the phone, Mrs. Gee." "Miriam, sorry if I woke you." The phone on the counter was turned off. I nodded, forcing a smile that felt like paper tearing. "It's fine. Go back to sleep." She tilted her head, studying me for a moment, that same old half-smile again, before turning away. I stood there, watching the back of her gray hair shimmer under the kitchen light. It wasn't until she disappeared down the hallway that I noticed the faint smell of smoke again. Old smoke, the kind that lives in wood, not in air. After that night, I started to doubt the line between exhaustion and haunting. Every object in the house seemed to breathe differently. The clock ticked out of rhythm. The fireplace crackled without flame. Even the photographs on the wall looked as though someone had shifted them by an inch, aligning the past just slightly off-center. Once, while cleaning my workbench, I found a new brush, old-fashioned, with a wooden handle and Cecilia's initials carved at the base. CH. I hadn't owned one like that in decades. I called her name through the house. No answer. Only the faint creak of the attic door closing. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she had a strange sense of nostalgia. Maybe she'd found the brush in storage. Maybe grief was distorting everything I saw. But deep down, I knew this wasn't a coincidence. The rhythm of my house, my sanctuary, was slowly sinking to hers. That night, unable to sleep, I walked to the workshop. The moonlight fell through the window in a pale stripe across the floor. The frame of fire gleamed under it, cleaner than it had ever been. I reached out, tracing the edge with my fingertip. And that's when I saw it. Faint fingerprints in the soot that remained, small ovals pressed into the blackened wood. Not mine, someone else's. The ash shimmered faintly, as if it remembered being touched. I turned off the light and went to bed, telling myself it was nothing. But sleep didn't come easy. The morning it happened, the house was too quiet. No humming, no soft footsteps from the kitchen, no sound of the broom brushing against the floorboards. Just silence, thick, deliberate, like the air before thunder. I walked into my study with a cup of coffee, trying to shake off the unease that had followed me all week. The door was slightly ajar. I was sure I'd locked it the night before. My desk, usually neat, looked disturbed. Drawers not fully closed, papers stacked at strange angles. At first, I thought maybe the wind had slipped through an open window. But then I saw the folder. It was the old leather one I kept at the bottom of the cabinet, the one marked Family Records. The latch was open. I felt the chill before I even touched it. Inside, the documents were rearranged. Birth certificates, property deeds, insurance papers. All still there. Except one. Cecilia's death certificate was gone. In its place lay another document. Crisp, freshly printed, still smelling of ink. Property ownership. Certificate name, Cecilia Harrow. Address, The Revival House, 22 Ashmore Lane, Boston, MA. The house I was standing in. My house. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The coffee cooled in my hand, untouched. Someone had gone through my private files, forged legal documents, or worse, replaced them. But why? I felt that familiar, creeping cold rise through my spine. Not fear, exactly, but the recognition of something I had already lost once. When I found her, she was in the kitchen, arranging fresh flowers in a vase, the same lilies from my husband's funeral, as if the house could never rid itself of death. "Cecilia," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "Did you go into my study?" She turned slowly, that calm half-smile still fixed on her face. I was only cleaning. The room was dusty." "You opened my drawers?" "Just to tidy up the papers." She paused, eyes drifting past me to the hallway. "They were such a mess. I thought you might appreciate some order." I set the coffee down, fingers trembling. "And this?" I held up the document. "Where'd this come from?" Her gaze dropped to it, then back to me. She didn't blink. Maybe someone's just returning what's theirs. The words came out so softly that, for a second, I wasn't sure if I'd heard them right. "What do you mean?" She wiped her hands on the towel, turned toward the window. "You've lived in this house a long time, Miriam. Don't you think it's strange how much of it still remembers me?" The question twisted in my chest. "Remembers you?" "This was our dream, not yours alone." She smiled faintly. "Dreams belong to the ones who survive them." For a heartbeat, I saw something flicker behind her eyes. Not madness, but ownership. Something ancient, wordless, terrifying in its calm certainty. After she left the room, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the paper. The ink looked official. The seal looked real. I held it up to the light, hoping to catch some sign of forgery, smudged edges, blurred signatures. But it was flawless. The signature at the bottom read, Cecilia M. Harrow. Her handwriting. I had seen that exact signature once before. On a letter she wrote to me 2 weeks before the fire, the one I'd burned without reading because I couldn't stand her accusations. Now here it was again, resurrected from the ash. That afternoon, I went to the local registrar's office, carrying both documents, mine and hers, in a sealed envelope. The clerk typed the names into the database, then frowned. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but the record shows this property has 2 registered owners, Miriam Harrow and Cecilia Harrow. It's been updated recently. That's impossible. She's been dead for 32 years. The clerk's expression didn't change. "Maybe you should contact the Department of Probate. It might be an identity restoration case." Identity restoration. The phrase felt like mockery. That was my job. Restoring the dead, not reviving them. When I returned home, the front door was unlocked. On the hallway table sat the frame of fire, upright, clean, with a new photograph inside. The same picture I'd found burned years ago, but now fully restored. Cecilia's face smiled back at me from the glass, unscarred. The inscription underneath, carved into the wooden border, read, "She never left." My knees gave way. The sound of my heartbeat filled the room, hard and uneven. I called out her name, but the house stayed silent. Only the faint smell of varnish lingered. Her scent, her craft, her mark. That night, I locked my study, checked every drawer, hid the remaining documents in a safe. But even as I did, I knew it was pointless. You can't protect the living from the dead, not when they share your blood. I spent hours at my desk, staring at the paper with her name on it. Cecilia Harrow. It looked right. It looked earned. The longer I looked, the more I began to wonder if she had ever really died at all. Maybe she had been alive all this time, living quietly, watching from somewhere close, waiting until I'd built the life she couldn't have. And now she had come back to claim it. Every decision I had made since that night, every house, every frame, every breath, had been shaped by her absence. And now she was here to undo it all. The next few days blurred into a ritual of denial. I told myself the documents were a mistake, that there had to be a logical explanation, a clerical error, an identity theft case, anything but what it appeared to be. But logic has no defense against blood. I began to dig. I pulled out the old family box, brittle folders, curled photographs, even the singed edge of Cecilia's last letter that I had once burned but couldn't bring myself to throw away. I ordered DNA verification from the old hospital files, cross-checked dates of birth, employment records, tax filings. Every thread led back to the same truth. Cecilia Harrow was alive. She had lived under different names across 3 states, working as a caretaker for elderly patients, always women, always alone. Her trail went cold a year ago. Get in. And then it ended here, in my house. When I saw her again that evening, she was standing by the garden window, watering my late husband's roses as if she had always done it. Her hands were calm, steady, familiar. "The soil here's too dry," she said softly. "Roses like their roots deep, don't they, Miriam?" I nodded, unable to answer. The air between us hummed with something unspoken, the echo of a 30-year lie. Later, alone in my study, I spread the evidence across the desk. Photographs, fingerprints, records. And, finally, the DNA confirmation. 99. 98% match. It felt like reading a ghost's birth certificate. I looked up at the mirror across the room and caught my reflection. Hollow eyes, trembling lips, the faint tremor of my pulse under the skin. "How long," I whispered to myself, "have I been living someone else's life? If Cecilia never died, then who lay in that coffin? Whose ashes had I wept over? And what kind of woman fakes her death only to come back and steal the life her sister built in her name?" I should have called the police, the lawyers, anyone, but I didn't. Because beneath the fury, beneath the confusion, there was something else. Relief. If she lived, then maybe I hadn't failed her. Maybe the fire hadn't been my fault. Maybe, for once, guilt could exhale. That night, I made my decision. No police, no lawyers, no noise. I would face her myself. I took the frame of fire from its place in the corner and set it in the center of the dining table. Its surface gleamed faintly under the chandelier, a circle of gold against the black scars. The photograph of our mother, half burned, half restored, looked like she was watching, waiting for us to finish what the flames had started. I lit no candles. The light of the setting sun bled through the curtains, copper and red, the same color the fire once had. I waited. When Cecilia came home, she paused at the doorway, eyes flicking to the frame. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Only the tick of the clock, each second slicing the silence thinner. Finally, I said, "I know the truth now." "Then you know it's mine." "What is?" "This life." The steadiness in her tone frightened me more than any confession could. She walked closer, fingers brushing the frame's edge. "Quinions, you did well, Miriam. You built everything I dreamed of. You wore my name, my craft, my grief. You kept me alive. Now I'm only taking back what's owed. You let me believe you were dead. You needed me to be." The sentence hung between us, too heavy to catch. She turned to leave, but I stepped in front of her. "You don't get to walk in and rewrite my life like a ledger." Her eyes softened, pitying, almost kind. "Then stop living mine. After she went upstairs, I sat there for hours, staring at the frame. The gold edges reflected the light like a heartbeat. I thought about the years spent working, restoring, pretending that making beauty from ashes was redemption enough. But all this time, I'd been preserving her, her face, her story, her shadow, and somewhere along the way, I had stopped existing as myself. Maybe that was why the fire spared me. Not as mercy, but as punishment. It left me alive only to live as her. When midnight came, I opened the window. The air was cold and clear. I could smell the faint trace of varnish and roses, the same scent that always lingered around her. I whispered into the darkness, not sure if I was praying or confessing. If the ashes can still hold a shape, then maybe I can too. I gathered the old files, the forged document, even the DNA report, and locked them away. Not to hide them, but to mark the line I was finally drawing. Tomorrow, I would speak, not to the police, to her. And for the first time, I would use my own voice. Not the echo of hers that I'd carried for decades. The days after that night moved like heavy smoke. Slow, suffocating, impossible to grasp. Cecilia's presence in the house began to change shape. She was no longer the silent, dutiful housekeeper. She moved with purpose now, as if the house itself answered to her. She started leaving early in the mornings, before sunrise, and returning late, long after I'd gone to bed. Sometimes I'd hear the front door open softly at 2, 3 a.m., followed by the faint creak of the floorboards near the storage room. One night, I caught the sound of her voice behind that door, low, urgent, whispering as if to someone else. But when I pushed it open, there was no one there. Just her standing in the half-light, a phone in her hand that wasn't lit, her eyes calm and unfocused. "Who are you talking to?" I asked. She smiled faintly. "Old friends. They still remember the fire." I felt the hairs rise on my arms. The storage room had always been mine, a place for antique tools, spare frames, and sealed boxes of old work. Now, it smelled different. Varnish, damp wood, and something faintly metallic, like blood that had dried a long time ago. When I went in after her one morning, I found the old cherrywood box, the one I used to keep my mother's sketches, in a different spot. The lid was open. Inside lay a new frame, not restored, rebuilt. Its edges were clean, perfect, as if untouched by time. But it wasn't empty. Behind the glass was a faded photo of my family, Cecilia, me, and my son Daniel, cut and reassembled from 3 different photographs. Collage that never existed. The glue was still wet. I touched it. My fingers came away sticky. Daniel noticed the tension before I said a word. He was 29, a man on paper, but still the boy who believed nothing could break his mother. One evening, as I sat at the table sorting documents, he slammed his phone down. "Mom, why is she still here?" "Because she has nowhere else to go." "Neither do we. She's creeping everyone out." "Everyone?" "The neighbors talk. The staff quit. I came by yesterday, and she was standing outside the gate just staring at the house. Like she owned it." I looked up sharply. "What's that supposed to mean?" I hesitated, then said quietly, "She's your aunt, Daniel." His face froze. "The dead one?" I nodded. He laughed once, short and sharp, disbelief trying to cover fear. "That's not funny. It's not a joke." He leaned back, crossing his arms. "So you're telling me the woman cleaning your dishes is a ghost?" "No," I said. "She's something worse, a survivor." "And why let her stay?" "Because she once pulled me out of a fire. And you." I stopped, but the words had already ignited. We just stood there watching. The silence that followed burned hotter than anger. He left without another word, the door closing hard enough to rattle the picture frames. After that conversation, the house grew smaller. Each room felt packed with unspoken things. The ticking of the clock sounded too loud. The windows fogged over from the inside, even when it wasn't cold. Sometimes I caught Daniel's voice outside, arguing with her by the garden wall. The tone was sharp, defensive, young. Then her voice steady, maternal, almost affectionate. I never heard the words, only the rhythm. The rhythm of something being rewritten. One afternoon, I went to make tea and found the kitchen shelves rearranged again. My cup, the one Daniel gave me years ago with the engraving, "For the woman who saved me," was gone. In its place sat another mug. Old, chipped, painted with the initials C.H. I ran my hand along the counter and found a thin layer of soot, invisible unless the light hit it just right. It wasn't dust. It was ash. That evening, the power flickered. The house sank into darkness for a full 10 seconds before the lights returned. When they did, Cecilia was standing at the end of the hallway holding a candle. Its flame glowed against her face, gold and soft, but the way she smiled made my stomach twist. "Don't worry," she said. "I'll keep the lights on for you this time." The words echoed long after she blew out the flame. I started sleeping with the door locked, but even then I woke every night at the same hour. The smell of smoke curling faintly through the vents, the whisper of someone walking just outside my room. Once, I thought I heard Daniel's voice calling, but when I opened the door, the hallway was empty, the air cold. The house was breathing again, slow, deep, full of old lungs. And somewhere inside that breath, something was waiting. I called it a family meeting. Though we all knew the word family had long stopped meaning the same thing. The workshop smelled of varnish and rain. The air was heavy with that faint sweetness of old wood and grief. Around us, rows of restored frames leaned against the walls, each one blackened by fire, each one resurrected by my hands. Cecilia stood across from me, her figure sharp against the light pouring through the glass roof. She looked calm, collected, terrifyingly composed. Daniel stood beside me, arms crossed, jaw tight, his eyes darting between us like a child watching his parents fight for the first time. I cleared my throat. "Let's finish this." Cecilia tilted her head. "Yes, let's." I set the frame of fire between us on the table. Its reflection trembled in the dim light like a living thing. "What do you want?" I asked, the words cutting through the hum of rain on the roof. She didn't hesitate. "Justice. And an apology for letting me die on paper." I almost laughed. "You didn't die because of me. You chose to disappear." Her eyes flared, but her voice stayed calm. "I chose survival. You chose to bury me to feel innocent." Daniel slammed his hand on the table. "Mom, she's insane." Cecilia turned toward him, her expression unreadable. "Hello, Daniel. You've grown. You look just like your father. Don't talk to me." "Why not? I was there the day he was born. I even held him before you did, Miriam, remember?" My heart lurched. "Stop." She smiled faintly. "You told him I was dead. You let him grow up believing his mother was an only child, that our bloodline began and ended with you. But blood doesn't end, it waits." Daniel looked at me then, confusion slicing through his anger. "Is that true?" I couldn't lie anymore. "Yes." He stepped back, shaking his head. "Unbelievable." Cecilia moved closer to the table, her hand hovering over the frame. "You see, Daniel, your mother built her life on my ashes. She used my name to open her first business. She turned my tragedy into her redemption. And when she finally had enough money, she built this house, the one we drew together on napkins when we were girls." I stared at her, heat rising behind my eyes. "You're twisting everything." "Am I? I worked for everything I have. With my hands, my craft, my story. You restored the same pieces I once made. You passed them off as yours. While you were dead." Her voice cracked for the first time. "I wasn't. I was hiding because you let me burn in their eyes." The words struck something deep, something raw and feral. I wanted to scream, but the sound wouldn't come. Only the ticking of the wall clock filled the silence, slow, accusing. Cecilia straightened, breathing unevenly. "Said you could have found me. You didn't. Instead, you built a shrine to my death. You made me a ghost, and then lived off my name. You don't understand." "Oh, I do. Better than you think. You loved being the one who survived. It made you special." The truth stung because it wasn't entirely wrong. For years, being the surviving sister had defined me. It gave me a reason for my guilt, for my strength, for my art. Without her death, who was I? Daniel finally broke the silence. This is ridiculous. Mom, she's trying to manipulate you. Cecilia turned to him, eyes narrowing. Is that what she taught you? That truth is manipulation when it hurts? You're just trying to steal her life. I'm only taking back what was always mine. You faked your death. You don't deserve anything. Lee. She stepped closer to him. Careful, Daniel. The fire doesn't care who deserves to burn. He flinched. I moved between them. Enough. My voice cracked against the air, raw and sharp. Cecilia looked at me then, really looked. The way she did when we were children, and she wanted me to admit I'd broken something. You want to fix this, Miriam? She asked quietly. Then tell the truth. The truth? Yes. Tell him who really started the fire. The room went still. Daniel froze, eyes darting between us. You're lying, I whispered. Am I? She leaned forward, her voice a whisper only I could hear. You poured the thinner into the lamp that night, remember? You said you needed light for one more coat of varnish. My breath caught. That was an accident. Accidents don't start in the heart, little sister. They start in envy. I slapped her. The sound cracked through the room like thunder. She didn't move. She just touched her cheek, smiled sadly, and whispered, There she is. The real Miriam. Daniel stepped forward, horrified. Mom, stay back, I said. Cecilia's eyes glistened. You've wanted this confrontation for 30 years. The fire didn't kill us, Miriam. It only changed what we were made of. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a lighter. The same old silver one from our childhood studio. Its surface was scratched but still gleamed faintly under the light. She flicked it open. The small flame danced between us, trembling, alive. We don't need a courtroom, she said softly. Just the fire. It will choose who's telling the truth. Put it down, Cecilia. You always say that when things get too hot. The flame reflected in her eyes, tiny, merciless. Daniel lunged forward, but I raised a hand. No, I said. Let her. She held the lighter closer to the frame. Do you remember what you said that night? You told me, let it burn. We'll start again. Stop. It clicked shut. The flame died. I should thank you, she said, stepping back. You gave me the freedom to become whoever I wanted. But I won't let you take my name anymore. You think a name makes you real? I said. You're nothing but a ghost that learned to sign documents. And you're a woman who built her success on a tombstone. Daniel's phone rang, the sound slicing the tension. He ignored it. We stood there, 3 bodies frozen in a room filled with ghosts. Finally, Cecilia spoke again, quietly but with venom. I'll leave when you admit it. Say it out loud. Say that the fire was your fault. I won't. Then the house will decide for us. Before I could stop her, she grabbed the frame and hurled it to the ground. Glass shattered, scattering light like sparks. The photograph inside, our mother's face, split cleanly down the middle. The silence after that was unbearable. Cecilia stared at the pieces, her chest heaving. There, she whispered. Now it's honest. I knelt and picked up a shard. The edge sliced my finger, a thin red line blooming instantly. Blood dotted the broken photo. Bright, undeniable. I looked up at her. You wanted blood? Here it is. Take it. She shook her head. Not yours. Ours. And then she walked out. Not running, not rushing, just leaving, like someone stepping through a door she had already opened long ago. Daniel helped me up, his hands trembling. What was that? I didn't answer. I couldn't. A smell of smoke filled the room again, though nothing burned. That night, I swept the glass into a box and locked the workshop. Outside, rain began to fall, steady and cold. I thought it would cleanse the air, but the scent of fire lingered. When I finally turned off the lights, I saw it. A faint orange glow outside the window, just beyond the garden wall. For one heartbeat, I thought the roses were burning. Then I realized it was her lighter. Flashing once, then gone. The day after the confrontation, silence became its own weapon. Cecilia was gone when I woke up. No note, no message, not even the faint smell of her perfume left behind. Only the floor of my workshop bore her trace. Shards of broken glass swept into a neat pile, as if she'd tidied her own crime scene. For a brief moment, I thought maybe she had vanished for good, but then the phone started ringing. It began with a journalist. "Mrs. Harrow, could you confirm the allegations circulating online? About the identity theft and the fraudulent inheritance?" My blood went cold. "What are you talking about?" The voice paused, as though rehearsing pity. "An online post? It's gone viral. A woman named Cecilia Harrow claims you stole her name, her business, even her death certificate to claim insurance and property." I hung up before she could finish. When I checked my email, there were dozens of messages. "Liar. Thief. Restoring antiques while you destroy lives." Someone had posted my face beside hers, side by side. Same eyes, same blood. The caption said, followed by a thread of accusations and photographs. Every secret I had buried was unearthed in public. Old addresses. Copies of certificates. Scanned signatures. The scholarship fund I created in her name was twisted into evidence that I profited from a dead woman. The post had thousands of shares within hours. By noon, my shop phone wouldn't stop ringing. Clients canceled their orders, some without even offering excuses. One of my employees, Lorna, refused to meet my eyes when she handed in her resignation. "It's not that I believe her, Mrs. Harrow," she said softly. "It's just, people talk, and art restoration is built on trust." I nodded numbly. Trust, the one thing I had built my entire life around, now slipping like dust between my fingers. That evening, I walked through the studio alone. The restored frames gleamed under the lamplight, but I could no longer see beauty in them. Only guilt. Cecilia had turned the craft we once shared into a weapon, and she didn't need fire this time, only an internet connection and patience. 2 days later, she uploaded a video. In it, Cecilia sat in what looked like a motel room. The lighting was soft, the tone calm, almost saintly. Her voice trembled just enough to sound sincere. "I never wanted to come forward," she began. "But when someone steals not just your name, but your life, silence becomes complicity." She held up old photographs of us. Childhood pictures, workshop memories, the image of the house half-built. My sister, Miriam, faked my death in 1992. She used my identity to inherit our family's property and build her business. Everything she has, she took from me. Then came the dagger. I forgive her. I just want the truth acknowledged. The comments section erupted like dry tinder. Justice for Cecilia trended by midnight. By morning, local art forums had picked up the story. Collectors I'd known for decades stopped returning my calls. One museum postponed our exhibition until further notice. Daniel stopped visiting. He sent a short message instead. "Mom, stay offline for now. People are saying terrible things." But silence has its own sound. A roar that grows louder the longer no one speaks for you. I started deleting messages without reading them. Then came the letters. Real ones, hand-delivered, written in the same looping script I used to see on our shared workshop invoices. Each envelope contained only a line or two, always signed C. H. "You can restore everything, Miriam, except what you destroyed. Ashes don't lie, they just wait. Every flame needs air. Stop breathing." I burned the first few, but burning didn't help. If anything, the smoke made her presence feel closer. It didn't take long for the whispers to reach the street. Mrs. Ellison from next door began crossing the road when she saw me. The mailman stopped lingering for tea. Even the grocery clerk who used to call me Miss Fix. It now rang up my purchases in silence. Once, I caught 2 strangers photographing the front of my house. When I stepped outside, they smiled awkwardly. "We're just documenting a local scandal," one said. "It's fascinating how truth and lies blur in family history." I shut the door without answering. The lock clicked louder than usual, like punctuation. A week later, a man from the Department of Probate came to deliver an official notice. "There's been a petition to reopen the case of your sister's presumed death. he explained. If proven fraudulent, property ownership will be reassigned to the living heir. You mean her? If the documents hold up, yes. He hesitated, lowering his voice. Off the record, ma'am, you might want to hire a lawyer. She's got the public's sympathy. That can move courts faster than evidence. When he left, I sat in my study for hours, staring at the notice. Outside, the sun was setting, bleeding through the curtains like diluted fire. That's when I understood. The flames never left. They just changed form. Cecilia's second video dropped the following Monday. This time, she held a restored frame, one of mine. This piece, she said softly, was signed under my initials. But my sister took the credit. She erased my name, just as she erased my life. I recognized the piece instantly. It was one of the commissions I'd sent to the museum last year. Somehow, she'd gotten it back. She ended the video with a single line that shattered what little peace I had left. She took my ashes. Now I'm taking her truth. By the end of the week, I had no staff left. My clients deleted their contracts. The workshop, once full of conversation, the hum of sanding, the soft crackle of varnish drying, was silent except for the drip of rain through the ceiling. When I looked around, I realized Cecilia had done what the fire couldn't. She'd taken everything I built. I wasn't just being accused of theft, I was being erased. One night, the doorbell rang. I almost didn't answer. Cecilia stood on the porch, dressed in black, a faint smile playing on her lips. The storm behind her framed her like something biblical, half angel, half executioner. You should have left when I did, she said softly. You're proud of what you've done? No. Proud would mean I feel clean. But this, she gestured toward the house, this is balance. You've ruined me. I gave you 30 years of my death. You can give me the rest of your life. I wanted to scream, to strike her, to beg. But the words died somewhere between rage and exhaustion. She leaned closer, her voice a whisper that cut like glass. Don't worry, Miriam. Fire doesn't kill people. It just shows who can stand the heat. Then she turned and walked away, vanishing into the rain. I watched her until she disappeared at the corner. My reflection in the window looked foreign, pale, hollow, trembling. For the first time, I saw myself as the world did, a thief, a liar, a woman haunted by her own creation. I had spent decades teaching others how to restore what was broken. Now, I was the ruin no one wanted to touch. That night, I sat on the floor of my empty workshop, surrounded by the remains of my craft. The smell of ash and varnish mingled again, the same scent as 30 years ago. I finally understood what she had done. She hadn't just stolen my name. She had burned my reputation, my credibility, my place in the world, and left me alive to feel every degree of the heat. The night I decided to enter her room, the wind outside was howling like it remembered our name. The power had gone out again. Or maybe she'd cut it, I could never tell anymore. Only the moon lit the hallway, spilling silver light across the floor like a blade. I moved quietly, barefoot, every step, a betrayal of my own fear. Cecilia's room was at the end of the corridor, the old guest room, once meant for visiting artists. She had turned it into her lair. Curtains drawn, door locked, air perpetually smelling of cold ashes and metal polish. But that night she'd left in a hurry. Her suitcase was gone, the lighter missing from her dresser, the door not fully closed. Inside, the air was thick with stillness. Her bed was made perfectly, no creases, no warmth. But on the desk sat her laptop, an external hard drive beside it, black and heavy, marked with a strip of masking tape. The words written in her handwriting stopped my breath. Ashmore, 1992. The year of the fire. I plugged it in. The screen came to life. Flickering gray static, then video files, dated decades apart. The first one opened to a grainy, time-stamped image. March 8, 1992. Hawthorne Street Workshop. CCTV 3. The footage was old, but unmistakable. The workshop. The night of the fire. I saw myself. Younger, hair darker, face softer. sanding a frame at the table, humming under my breath. Cecilia appeared behind me, a bottle in her hand. She was smiling. I remembered that night, or at least, I thought I did, but what I remembered was different from what I saw. I wasn't cleaning. She was pouring the thinner. Slowly, carefully, across the wooden floor near the window. I paused the video, stared at the frame frozen on her face. She looked calm, determined. There was no accident. When I pressed play again, she turned to the camera. For a split second, her gaze lopped directly into the lens, as if she knew it would one day be watched. Then she struck the match. The flash of light filled the frame, white, then orange, then chaos. I watched myself run into the frame, screaming her name, trying to drag her toward the door. She pushed me away. Smoke swallowed everything. The footage ended there. I sat frozen, unable to breathe. The only sound in the room was the faint buzz of the hard drive, like the heartbeat of something mechanical but alive. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't my fault. She had wanted to die, and she had wanted me to die with her. All those years of guilt, of building my life as penance, of carrying her ghost like a relic. They weren't atonement. They were manipulation. She had written the story first, and I had spent my life living inside it. There were other files on the drive. Letters, scans, even video clips recorded years later. I opened one at random. A shaky handheld video, dated 2002. Cecilia sat in front of a motel mirror, smoking, hair short, eyes hollow. "If you're watching this," she said to the camera, "then it means I'm ready to come home." She exhaled, the smoke clouding her reflection. I waited for her to confess. She never did, so now, I'll make her confess another way. The screen flickered and went dark. I pressed my hands to my mouth. My body trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of vindication. I began to search the room, desperate now. In the drawer beneath the desk, I found folders of printed screenshots, copies of posts, drafts of the letters she'd sent me. It was all planned. The accusations, the timing, even the phrasing of her viral videos. Every public statement had been scripted months before she ever came back to me. On the last page of one folder was a line scrawled in ink. She took my name. I'll take her truth. I tore the page in half. For the first time since she returned, I didn't feel fear, only fury. The kind of fury that feels almost holy. When I turned to leave, something caught my eye. A small wooden box tucked under the bed. Inside, neatly folded, were clippings of our mother's obituary, our childhood photos, and the ring Cecilia wore the night of the fire. It was melted into a warped circle, fused into the shape of a teardrop. I held it up to the light. The metal glimmered faintly, reflecting my face in its distorted curve. It looked like both of us. Twisted together, impossible to separate. For a long time I stared at it and realized the truth wasn't about who survived the fire. The fire was still burning. In me, in her, in everything we touched. I packed the hard drive into my coat pocket, closed the door quietly, and went downstairs. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the sky still smelled of smoke. I sat at my workbench and watched the drive's light blink, on, off, on, a pulse in the dark. I thought of every accusation she'd made, every word that scorched my name, and suddenly, it didn't matter. Because now, I had the match. The match that would burn her story to the ground. And finally, light mine. I picked up my phone, opened the recording app, and pressed the red button. My voice came out steady, clear. My name is Miriam Harrow. For 32 years, I believed I survived because my sister saved me. Tonight, I discovered the truth. She started the fire. She wanted to die. And she wanted me to die with her. But I ran. And she's been trying to finish what she started ever since. I ended the recording and stared at the blinking dot as it saved. The file sat there on the screen like a new kind of evidence, one that no flame could erase. For the first time in decades, I felt clean. Not innocent. I would never be that. But unburdened. All those years of guilt had been smoke. Now the air was clear. Morning crept in gray and thin. the kind of light that makes every object look like a secret. I hadn't slept. The hard drive sat beside my coffee cup, its small green light pulsing like a heartbeat. Proof, pulsing in time with my resolve. For the first time in weeks, I knew exactly what to do. I spent the next 3 days gathering every fragment that could speak when I could not. The CCTV footage, the handwritten notes she'd drafted for her viral posts, the melted ring, even the voice recording I'd made that night. Each piece was a shard of the same mirror. When placed together, they reflected the face of the truth I called Evelyn Shaw, an old friend from art school who had become a television journalist. We hadn't spoken in years, not since the first museum feature on my restoration work. She answered on the second ring. "Miriam, it's been ages. You sound different. I need your help," I said. "And I need you to believe me before you see anything." That's a dangerous way to start a conversation. I told her everything. The fire, the fake death, the accusations, the footage. At first, she was silent. Then, "You're saying you have proof your sister started the fire?" "Yes." "And she's alive. She's the one destroying me now." Evelyn exhaled sharply. "Send me the files. If it's real, we'll verify it. But Miriam, once this goes public, there's no turning back." "There was no turning back the night she lit the match," I said. The timing was perfect in its cruelty. Next week, the Museum of Restoration Arts was hosting an exhibition titled Restored Flames. It was meant to celebrate the resilience of art after disaster, and I had been its guest curator before the scandal. After the accusations, my name had been quietly removed from the posters. But Cecilia would be there. Her viral fame had made her a sympathetic figure, the wronged sister reclaiming her narrative. She had even been invited as a guest speaker. I couldn't think of a better stage for the truth. Evelyn agreed to cover the event under the pretense of a cultural segment. She would bring a small camera crew. Who would bring the evidence? For days, I rehearsed the moment in my mind. The lights dimming, the projector flickering to life, the crowds quiet before recognition. But revenge, I learned, has its own rhythm. It demands precision, not passion. I catalogued everything into labeled folders. The fire, the CCTV footage, the lie, the video confession she'd recorded in 2002, the proof, the DNA match, the forged inheritance forms, the voice, my own recording, calm and factual, not pleading. I made 3 copies of each set, one for Evelyn, one for the museum's legal board, and one that would play on the screen during the exhibit. If Cecilia tried to silence me, the truth would still speak. Every night, I tested the files, rewinding the footage until I could watch the flame ignite without flinching. What once felt like trauma now looked like evidence. The sound of the match striking no longer made my heart race. It steadied it. The night before the exhibition, I walked through my workshop one last time. The smell of varnish was comforting again. The broken frames leaned quietly against the walls, waiting for their next chance at redemption. For years, I believed I was restoring the world one artifact at a time. Now, I realized I had been restoring myself, piece by piece, waiting for this very moment. On the table sat the frame of fire, repaired again. I'd replaced the glass, polished the edges, left the charred scars untouched. I slid a single new photograph inside, a still from the CCTV footage, Cecilia's hand holding the match. No captions, no explanation. Just the truth, frozen in the instant before everything burned. Daniel called that night. "Mom, are you sure you want to do this?" "I have to. Even if it destroys her?" "It already did. I'm just showing the world the ashes." He was silent for a long time. Then, quietly, "I'll be there." For the first time in months, I felt something warm slip back into my chest, not forgiveness, but faith. I dressed carefully the next morning. Black suit, white shirt, no jewelry except the melted ring I'd reshaped into a pendant. It hung cold against my throat, heavy and sharp, a reminder of what fire leaves behind. Before leaving, I stood in front of the mirror. For a long moment, I didn't see guilt or fear looking back, only clarity. The kind of clarity that feels like standing in sunlight after years of smoke. Fidelis. You've spent half your life restoring the wrong person. Now, restore yourself. Then I turned off the lights, locked the door, and stepped into the day. The museum auditorium was a cathedral of glass and whispers. The exhibition, Restored Flames, had drawn a larger crowd than anyone expected. Journalists, collectors, restoration students, even curious strangers lured by the spectacle of scandal. After weeks of headlines about the Harrow sisters, everyone wanted to see how two women could burn each other without touching a match. I stood backstage, the frame of fire in my hands. The surface gleamed faintly under the light, half polished, half charred. The smell of varnish mixed with perfume and the metallic tang of nerves. Behind me, Evelyn adjusted her microphone. "Are you sure about this?" she asked softly. "Absolutely," I said. "I'll finish it." She nodded, eyes flicking toward the stage. "Then go take back your name." The curator, unaware of what was coming, began her introduction. "Tonight, we honor resilience, the art of restoration, the beauty that rises from destruction." Cecilia was seated in the front row, poised in black silk, her silver hair catching the light like a halo. She smiled graciously as people whispered, pointed, admired. To them, she was the survivor. To me, she was the arsonist who'd rewritten history. When my name was announced, the crowd shifted, murmurs rippled like wind across dry leaves. A few people clapped, uncertain whether they were allowed to. I stepped onto the stage. For the first time in 30 years, I didn't flinch at the brightness of lights. "Good evening," I began, my voice steady. "Tonight, I'd like to show you a piece that took 32 years to restore." A large canvas stood behind me, draped in black cloth. I gestured to the technician in the wings. The cloth lifted, revealing the photograph. A woman's face, half burned, half reconstructed. The left side melted into darkness. The right side luminous and whole. The audience gasped softly. "This," I said, "is my final restoration." It was made with ash collected from a fire that destroyed not only a house, but 2 lives. Cecilia rose slowly from her seat. "You can't do this," she said, her voice breaking through the hum. "Sit down," someone hissed behind her, but she ignored it. "You have no right to use my image," she shouted. The cameras turned to her. "Perfect." "Oh, but I do," I said, turning toward her. "Because this isn't your image, Cecilia. It's mine. It's what you left me, half a life, half a truth." The audience tensed, sensing the shift. Whispers filled the air like sparks. "They're lying," she said. "You forged everything. You." I held up the small remote in my hand. "No." I restored it. The projector behind me came to life with a hum. The first video flickered on the screen. Grainy black and white footage, dated March 8, 1992. At first, there was nothing but static. Then, the workshop appeared. Our old space, caught forever in monochrome. The crowd watched as the younger me worked at the table. And then Cecilia entered the frame. They saw her pour the liquid. They saw the match. They saw the fire bloom. Gasps broke out in waves. Someone whispered, "Oh my God!" Cecilia lunged toward the projector. "Turn that off. You don't know what you're seeing." Security moved instinctively, but I raised a hand. "Let her speak." She froze, eyes wild. "That video doesn't prove anything. I was cleaning. You edited it." "No," I said softly. "Choreographed it." The next clip rolled, the one she had recorded in 2002. Her voice filled the room. I waited for her to confess. She never did. "So now, I'll make her confess another way." The audience fell silent. No one breathed. Cecilia's face drained of color. "Stop it," she whispered. "You don't understand what I was." "I understand perfectly," I said. "I didn't want forgiveness. You wanted a witness." She staggered backward, colliding with a row of chairs. The crowd parted instinctively, their faces glowing blue in the flicker of the screen. "You used my death," she spat. "You built your empire on my ashes." "And you used my guilt," I said. "You turned it into your resurrection." We stood inches apart, sisters separated by a gulf no bridge could ever close. You think showing them this will make you pure? She hissed. Truth isn't purity, I said quietly. It's exposure. I turned to the audience, raised my voice so every camera caught it. Oh, she started that fire. I spent 30 years believing it was my fault. But guilt can't rewrite evidence, and forgiveness doesn't erase crime. Behind me, the frame glowed under the light. The ashes embedded in the resin catching every beam, turning silver. It looked alive. Cecilia's knees buckled. She sank to the floor, covering her face. For a moment she looked small, the child I once knew, trembling in the dark. Then her hands fell away, and her eyes found mine again. Fierce, defiant even in defeat. "You think this ends me?" she said. "Fire doesn't die, Miriam. It spreads." "Maybe," I whispered, "but it spreads light, too." Security escorted her away gently, but the room didn't move. No one clapped at first. Then someone did. A single sharp sound that cracked the air. Another joined. Then another. Hey, soon the hall erupted. Not in cheers. In something heavier, louder, more human. Vindication. Evelyn's camera crew caught everything. The footage, the confession, the collapse. But all I could see was the frame, shining under the light. I stepped closer to it, the crowd blurring around me. Under the glass, the ashes sparkled like metal dust. Tiny, beautiful remnants of destruction. "The fire never killed anyone," I said into the microphone, voice trembling. "It just revealed what was already burning." When the applause faded, I stayed there for a moment longer. The lights softened. I felt the heat of the projectors on my skin. Warm, forgiving. Evelyn approached, lowering her voice. "It's over." "No," I said. "It's finally beginning." Cameras flashed. Someone shouted questions. About evidence, about justice, about how two sisters could destroy and restore each other in the same breath. I didn't answer. Some truths are too clean to explain. As they led Cecilia away, she looked back once. There was no hatred in her face now, only exhaustion. Maybe even relief. For a fleeting second, I wanted to reach out, to tell her I understood. But mercy, I realized, was another kind of fire, one I no longer had to hold. When the hall emptied, I stood alone on the stage. The projector screen was blank now, but its afterglow painted the room in pale gold. I touched the frame of fire, feeling the rough edges of the charred wood. It was warm. Not from electricity, but from friction, from the energy of everything it had survived. I whispered to it, to her, to myself. "You see, Cecilia? Fire didn't kill us. It just showed what we were made of." I leaned closer, almost expecting an answer. The glass reflected only my face, lined, calm, alive. For the first time, I looked like myself. Outside, cameras flashed through the glass walls of the museum, catching fragments of the scene. The frame glowing under the lights, a woman standing before it, surrounded by the smoke of her own redemption. Reporters would later write about the harrow revelation, how one sister's art became another's undoing. But no one could capture the sound that filled that space, the hush after truth, the quiet that feels like rain after decades of drought. I packed the frame carefully, wrapping it in cloth as though it were something sacred. Lynn touched my shoulder. "You did it," she said. "No," I replied, eyes on the silver ashes beneath the glass. "The fire did." When I stepped out of the museum, the night air felt impossibly still. The crowd's murmurs faded behind me, replaced by the hush of rain beginning to fall. Soft, apologetic, almost like applause that had run out of breath. The streetlights blurred in the wet glass of the pavement. I walked without direction, the frame of fire tucked carefully beneath my arm. The metal clasp was warm against my palm, as if the frame itself still remembered the heat of exposure. For the first time in 32 years, I felt light. Not happy, not free, just light, the absence of weight. Guilt had always been heavier than grief. Now it was gone, and I didn't quite know what to do with the space it left. When I reached home, the porch light was still on. No cars, no shadow waiting by the door. The silence of the house met me like an old friend I had once abandoned. Inside, everything was unnervingly neat. The tea set polished, curtains open, a faint trace of her perfume lingering, lavender and smoke. For a heartbeat, I thought she might still be here, standing in the kitchen, ready to start another round of the same old war. Yet the house was empty. On the dining table lay a single folded note, written in her slanted handwriting. You know, this time I'm really gone. No signature. No explanation. Just that. I read it once, twice, then slid it into the corner of the frame of fire behind the glass. The paper fit perfectly beside the burned photograph, like it had been waiting for its place all along. I didn't cry. I made tea, the way I used to before everything burned. 1 spoon of honey, no sugar. Steam rose from the cup and fogged the window. Outside, the rain thickened into silver lines. The reflection that stared back at me was tired but whole. I had become the age my sister never reached. That realization felt strange. A quiet privilege, almost undeserved. I walked through each room slowly, touching objects as I passed. The varnished tables, the photographs, the cracked mirror in the hallway that once showed 2 shadows instead of 1. Tonight it showed only me. The house exhaled, and I exhaled with it. At dawn, Daniel arrived. He didn't say anything at first, just stood in the doorway, drenched from the rain, watching me place the frame back on the mantel. "She's gone," I said. "Where?" "Where all fires go when there's nothing left to burn." He nodded, stepping closer. "The news is everywhere, Mom. They know now. Everyone knows. Let them." He hesitated, then asked quietly, "Do you forgive her?" I looked at the ashes sealed behind the glass. "Forgiveness isn't the right word," I said. "Some things just stop hurting. That's all." He reached for my hand. For the first time in years, I didn't pull away. Later that morning, the sun broke through the clouds, thin and pale, but real. It spilled across the wooden floor, touching the frame where the ashes shimmered faintly like silver dust. I sat down beside it and whispered, "You won, you know. You got the last word." The house didn't answer. Only the faint crackle of the fireplace, long cold, seemed to sigh in return. I thought of all the ways she had tried to be reborn, through fire, through lies, through me. Maybe that was the only way she knew how to live. Some people breathe air. She breathed flame. That evening I packed a small suitcase, not to run, to begin again. There was a property listing pinned to the fridge, a studio for sale near the coast. The listing photo showed tall windows and pale, clean light. No smoke. Before leaving, I stood once more before the frame of fire. The photograph inside had changed over the years, the edges more brittle, the colors softer. But now, sealed with her final note, it felt complete. I whispered a final line into the stillness. "You lived in the fire, Cecilia. Jit'll wear towed." Then I turned off the porch lamp, locked the door, and walked into the morning. A year has passed since the night the truth burned its way into daylight. Boston's winters have softened around me. Even the cold feels gentler now. When I wake, I no longer reach for silence. I reach for purpose. The world never quite forgot. The Harrow sisters. The story of the fire, the betrayal, the exhibition that turned truth into art. It still circulates online, stripped of nuance, told in versions I barely recognize. But that's all right. Let them tell it how they need to. I've stopped chasing control over what the world remembers. I'm more interested in what it can rebuild. I bought the small brick building near the river, an old photography lab abandoned after a flood. The windows were shattered, the floorboards warped by water, the smell of mildew clinging like memory. It was perfect. I named it Ash Revival Studio. The first morning I opened its doors, sunlight poured through the cracked glass in golden streaks, touching every surface like blessing. I set the frame of fire on the wall, now enclosed behind glass, its edges sealed, its ashes preserved. Beneath it, a plaque read, "Burned once. Born again." It wasn't decoration, it was a vow. Word spread quickly. Women began arriving, Some old, some young, most carrying something invisible in their hands. Grief, guilt, unspoken things. They came not to learn art, but to reclaim fragments of their lives. We restored photographs damaged by fire, flood, time, and sometimes by people. When they first walked in, they'd whisper, "Do you think this can still be saved?" I always gave the same answer. Everything can be saved. It just won't look the same. We used real ash in our process. Not for effect, but for truth. It gave the restored images a strange texture, like the past refusing to vanish completely. I told them that was the point. One woman brought a photo of her daughter lost in a house fire. Another, an image of a husband she'd spent half her life forgiving. They learned to mix varnish, to polish edges, to watch light pass through ruin and make beauty of it. Every time a piece was finished, they'd hold it up to the window, and for a moment, their faces would glow. I think that's when I realized, restoration isn't about returning to what was, it's about honoring what survived. The frame of fire still hangs above the front table, sealed behind glass like a relic. Visitors ask if I ever plan to sell it, or at least display it somewhere grander. I always shake my head. It's not for sale, I say. It's the only thing in this room that refused to be restored. Sometimes, when the afternoon sun hits the glass, the ashes shimmer like they're breathing. In those moments, I can almost hear her again. Not angry, not haunting, just present. A whisper between the sound of brushes and laughter. Keep the flame. I don't answer aloud anymore, working. Daniel visits every Sunday. He helps me teach the younger students how to handle delicate prints, how to clean the negatives without smudging the truth out of them. He's steadier now, calmer. Sometimes I catch him staring at the frame of fire, his reflection blending with mine. "Do you ever think she's really gone?" I asked once. "Gone?" I smiled. "Fire doesn't go. It just moves on." He nodded as though that finally made sense. One afternoon, a new student, a quiet woman with silver hair, asked the question they all eventually ask. "Ms. Miriam," she said, wiping her hands on a cloth, "are you still afraid of fire?" The class fell silent. I looked at the row of faces, women who had lost, rebuilt, begun again, and felt a strange warmth rise in my chest. I thought of Cecilia, of the flames, of the years spent fearing everything that could ignite. And then I laughed softly. "No," I said, "I'm not afraid of fire anymore." Effie tilted her head. "Then what are you afraid of?" I smiled. "That one day, I'll stop burning before I've finished living." The room stayed quiet for a moment, the kind of quiet that feels full instead of empty. Then the sound of brushes resumed, the smell of varnish thickened, and the day went on. When everyone leaves, I stay behind to clean the tables and water the plants. The city outside hums faintly, car lights flickering across the river, sirens echoing in the distance. I turn off the main lamps, leaving only one bulb glowing near the frame. Its light flickers softly, almost like a heartbeat. Sometimes I talk to her then, not in grief but in gratitude. "You gave me the fire," I whisper. "I gave it shape." The glass never answers, but the reflection of the flame in it dances. Small, stubborn, alive. People still ask if I miss her. The answer changes with the weather. On rainy days, I do. On bright days, I just hope she found peace somewhere that doesn't require burning to stay warm. I like to think she'd approve of this place. The women laughing over broken photographs, the smell of smoke replaced by lavender oil, the sound of life being pieced back together. Maybe this is what she wanted all along, not survival, but continuation. And if so, then I've kept my promise. She gave me ashes. I built light. Each evening before I leave, I touch the glass of the frame once. A ritual, small and grounding. My reflection overlaps hers. Two faces that once fought to own a single story. Now, we share it. Equal halves. The inscription beneath gleams faintly under the lamp. Burned once, born again. And I finally understand what it means. Being burned once doesn't mean being ruined. It means being proven. When students graduate, I give each of them a small silver pendant shaped like a flame. Not polished, not perfect, slightly uneven, like it's still alive. On the back, 3 words are engraved. Keep it burning. Because I've learned something about fire. It's not the enemy. It's the reminder. It tells you what still has heat inside it, what still matters enough to glow. I used to think my story ended in the fire. Now I know. That was just where the light began. The camera light blinks red. The room is silent except for the hum of the old film reel I keep running. Habit, maybe comfort. I sit where the light is softest, in front of the frame of fire. Behind the glass, the ashes shimmer like quiet stars. I take a slow breath and begin. If one day someone knocks on your door wearing the face of your past, don't run. They might not be there to take your life. They might be there to see if you've really lived. I pause, let the words settle. The lens reflects my face, older, lined, alive. It feels strange to speak to a camera again. For years, I only faced it through other people's stories. Press interviews, accusations, court hearings. This time, it's mine. I used to think fire was punishment, I say quietly. But now I know. It's invitation. It burns away what pretends, until only truth remains. The studio behind me glows in warm evening light. Half-finished restorations cover the tables. Women's hands captured mid-motion, photographs of faces rescued from decay. Every image, a small rebellion against forgetting. This place, I gesture softly, was built from what survived. Not because I'm brave, but because I finally stopped running from what was left. I lean forward, elbows on the table, voice lowering. We all have a fire somewhere. A memory, a regret, a name we can't say without tasting ash. For years, I let mine define me. But the thing about flames is, they don't keep shape. They pass. They leave warmth if you let them. I reach for the frame beside me, tilt it slightly so the glass catches light. The ashes glitter like silver dust. This, I say, is what's left of everything that was meant to destroy me. And it's beautiful, isn't it? Not because it's perfect, but because it lived. A small smile touches my lips. So if you're watching this, and your story still smells like smoke, don't hide it. Don't bury it. Fire only wins when you pretend it never happened. The lens feels closer now. The quiet thickens. I can almost hear my sister's laughter in the static of the microphone. Faint, mischievous, familiar. I let it stay. For a long time, I thought I owed my life to the one who saved me from the flames. Now I understand. I owed it to myself to step back into the light. I glance toward the window. Outside, dusk has fallen. The sky painted in shades of smoke and rose. I think of all the women who walk through the door of Ash Revival Studio each week, carrying burned photos, cracked memories, broken parts of themselves, and how, piece by piece, they learn to make beauty from ruin. Share this story, I say softly, looking straight into the camera. Maybe someone out there is still living inside a house made of ashes, waiting for a flame to show them the way out. I close the frame's latch, the small metallic click echoing through the room. The air feels warm now, even though the heater's been off for hours. The truth is, I add, not all fires destroy. Some burn so we can see. The light on the camera blinks once, signaling the last few seconds of recording. I take one final breath, steady, free. My story ends here, I say, the words quiet but certain. But maybe, just maybe, this is the first flame that's ever burned for my freedom. The camera clicks off. The room returns to silence. Outside, the night settles gently over the studio. Inside the frame, the ashes gleam one last time, not as ghosts, but as light.